Hi everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes to me from Finite Atticus, who asks, "Hey Steve, I'm a David Lynch fan. Could you compare and contrast him to Kubrick, then explain why you would still choose Kubrick as your favorite?" Contrasting Lynch and Kubrick is a lot easier than comparing them because just on a superficial level they have such different divergent styles of storytelling. Kubrick is fairly linear and traditional in terms of his storytelling, and Lynch is more abstract, more surreal. His stories focus less on traditional point A to point B narratives. At least the films for which Lynch is usually most noted, like Blue Velvet or Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway or something like that. I mean, there are narrative threads that run through them. They are stories. They're not completely abstract, but they veer much more toward the surreal and toward the abstract and away from the traditional linear narrative. And Kubrick's films, for the most part, are straightforward in terms of their storytelling. In terms of comparisons, with those stylistic differences taken into consideration, once you account for those, they do have a lot in common. They are both very interested in images, in memorable images. They both take full advantage of film as a visual medium. They're both incredibly talented visual artists as directors. Lynch tends to favor images more sort of for their own sake, while Kubrick incorporates them into stories, more coherent stories. But they both love images. They both have sympathy for outcasts. They both tell stories that deal with themes of alienation or of uncertainty, things like that. So they have those things in common as well. As for why I prefer Kubrick to Lynch, I guess it's just a matter of personal taste. I mean, there's something about the way Kubrick is able to tell stories with a kind of artistic detachment that I really, really respond to. How he's able to present us with his story, with his images, but there's a feeling that he himself as the storyteller is removed from it, as though he doesn't really have a stake in it. He's just sort of presenting us this without judgment, without any sort of personal editorial from him, which of course isn't what's actually happened, because we're watching a fictional film and the whole thing is Kubrick's editorial. The whole thing is Kubrick's perspective and Kubrick's point of view. But he presents it with an air of detachment, as though we're not watching something that has been shaped, or that he's not telling us how to feel about things. And I really like that aesthetic. Lynch, on the other hand, feels much closer to his material on an emotional level, which works splendidly for him. You know, I think David Lynch is an incredibly talented filmmaker. I just happen to prefer Stanley Kubrick. Claude P. Shives, Steve, homeschooling curricula do not meet academic standards. Homeschooling. Editor Noah Berlatsky, Detroit, Greenhaven Press, 2010. Opposing viewpoints. Reprint from Homeschoolers Who Don't Learn Science Shouldn't Receive a Diploma. American Chronicle, 2008. Opposing viewpoints in context. Web, 25 September 2013. Does that article happen to be yours, or was it made by a different Steve? No, it's mine. I wrote it. Here's the book, actually. This is a copy of it. It's a reprint of an article I wrote for my blog that I subsequently also published at the website American Chronicle. And what was really cool is they contacted me. It was someone involved with the putting together of this edition of Opposing Viewpoints that was dealing with homeschooling, saw my article and contacted me, asking me if I would allow it to be reprinted in this edition. And of course I was more than happy to. It's really cool. Mine is actually the second essay in here. It's under Chapter 1, How Does Homeschooling Affect Children? And I'm number 2, Homeschooling Curricula Do Not Meet Academic Standards. It's pretty cool. I was very excited when this came out. It's a highlight of my not very extensive career as a published author. So yeah, it's cool that you found this. This is something I'm really happy about and really proud of. It's definitely my article. That's all, folkers. What would you do if you found someone physically hurting your cat? Would you let the rage take over, possibly ending in you going to prison? Oh, it's definitely a possibility. I could certainly see myself being angry enough to do something to someone who was hurting my cat that would send me to prison. Look, I think that people who inflict cruelty on animals are morally no different than people who inflict cruelty on children or on any other person or being that is capable of experiencing suffering and cruelty that can't help themselves. It's when you abuse an animal, and especially an animal that's so much smaller than you, like a typical house cat or a dog or something. That to me is the lowest, most contemptible, cowardly thing that a person can do. And the same thing if you abuse a child. If you abuse anything that isn't capable of fighting back, if you impose your strength and your superiority on something and use that to inflict harm and cruelty, there's no hell hot enough for you if you do that. And yeah, absolutely I would go to jail for my cat in that situation, just as I would go to jail for a child or for an elderly person that couldn't defend themselves. I mean, if I was in that moment and I was that angry and I just sort of let myself fly off the handle, absolutely, absolutely. It's utterly beneath contempt. Chloe Segal, Steve, do you have any thoughts on the culture of intellectual machismo? Those who present themselves as intellectually superior as an argument. For instance, I was roped into one of these discussions the other day on one of your videos with someone I merely attempted to correct. They tried to convince me my issue was that I just could not comprehend their point. Do you have any personal examples of this that stand out for you? I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I think generally speaking, if you are having a discussion with someone and they are incapable of comprehending your argument, that is on you. That's probably a sign of your intellectual shortcoming, not your intellectual superiority. The other person should, unless you're talking about an incredibly complex topic that you are an expert on and the other person is just not fluent in at all. And I'm talking like an incredibly, like quantum mechanics level stuff. Short of something like that, I think you should be able to articulate your position and make your argument in such a way that the other person can understand the point you're trying to make, whatever level they're at. That to me is the sign of a strong intellect. If you're in an argument with someone and you're not getting what they're saying and their response to you is, well, it's just over your head, you're just not at my level, not only is that person an arrogant, condescending asshole, but they're probably not nearly as intelligent and not nearly as capable of a communicator as they fancy themselves. Because if they were that smart and their point was really that good, they should be able to articulate it in a way that you can understand. And they should not be simply hiding behind their supposed intellectual superiority to win the argument. Selena Salo, hey Steve, serious question this time. How do you usually deal with friends and or family that are using religion to make them feel better, kind of become better? I'm always confused with this because I don't want to just tear into their comfort, but there's always the negative stuff that tends to come with religion, like strict, non-bending moral rules, discrimination, and the holier-than-thou mentality. If we're talking about a person who actually has become better, a person who is genuinely a good person, and maybe they recently had a religious experience or a conversion, and they've turned their life around and they're crediting their religion with that, or maybe they were a good person all along and they just cite their religious faith as like the star that guides them. In that case, my way of approaching it, if we ever talk about it, is to say that I give them the credit. You know, my father-in-law, for example, is a deeply Christian man. Is one of the smartest and most moral people I know in my life. I mean, he's a great role model in terms of his morality and his conduct. And I give him credit for that. He gives God credit for that. He says that it's because of his Christian faith and his following the example of Jesus and etc. I say it's him. I give him credit. And that's the difference. I think it's a matter of giving credit to the right person. If a person is a good person or has turned their life around, has gotten rid of the bad habits and become a better parent or a better spouse or whatever, I give them the credit. That's the only real difference. If they claim that their religion has done this for them, I don't deny that they have done something good. I just say that it's them that deserves the credit, not their religious figure, whoever that may be. McFly88, Steve, can't remember if you've ever touched on this, but where do you stand now, in retrospect, on the Montreal screw job? I was a bit skeptical back then, and with confidence in McMahon as a brilliant professional and seeing how things have turned out for everyone involved, I can't help but consider it worked, not worked shoot, as Jim Cornette puts it. Sorry, but everything makes too much sense now. Eh? For those of you who don't know what the Montreal screw job is, those of you who aren't wrestling fans, basically it took place in November of 1997, and it was when Vince McMahon, who was and still is the promoter of what is now WWE, what was WWF at the time, he abruptly changed the finish of the main event match without telling at least one of the participants. There's still disagreement over how much everybody involved knew, but the situation was that Bret Hart was the WWF champion at the time. His contract was up and he was about to leave and go to the rival company, WCW. And Vince wanted to make sure that Bret did not leave the company as the world champion. So in order to make sure that Bret would not be the world champion, he contrived to just sort of end the match without telling Bret and have Shawn Michaels declared the winner. And this was all necessary because Bret had refused to lose the match to Shawn and to drop the title to him on his own. I think that it was a shoot. I don't think that it was a work. I don't even think it was a worked shoot, as Jim Cornette says. I think that Bret didn't know anything about it. I think Shawn has admitted that he knew about it, that he knew what the finish was going to be beforehand, and he went along with it, that he knew it was coming when he put Bret into the sharpshooter and Vince called for the bell, that Shawn knew that, at least generally speaking, that Shawn knew that was coming. I think it was a shoot. The reason I think it was a shoot is, you say that things have sort of worked out for everybody at this point, but at the time, I don't see what Vince's motivation would be for working that angle, where Bret basically gets screwed and leaves the company as a guy illegitimately taken, stripped of his title, and then gets to go to the competition with this ready-made storyline. Now, WCW completely fucked it up from the very beginning. They totally booted Bret Hart and misused him and didn't take any advantage of the heat that he had on him coming in after Montreal. They completely screwed it up. But I don't think Vince could have counted on that at the time. At the time, WCW was still running pretty hot. They were building up to their Starrcade show that year, which was the Hogan versus Sting blow-off match. They were really, really firing on all cylinders. And I don't think Vince would have willingly worked an angle where he would have given them one of his top stars with this ready-made storyline. I just don't see why Vince would have done that. So yeah, I think it was a shoot, and I think it was almost entirely Bret's fault. I think Bret should have agreed to put Shawn Michaels over on that show. He knew he was leaving the company. He knew that he had to drop the title or lose the title in some way, and Vince, his boss, the promoter, had asked him to lose the title to Shawn Michaels at this show, and Bret just said no. He just refused to do business, as they say. And I think he should have done business. He should have done the right thing. He was leaving the company, should have dropped the title to the next guy, and then left the company that way. And he didn't do it. So, is it justifiable for Vince to have done what he did? To have screwed Bret like that? It's hard to defend it, but at the same time, it wouldn't have been necessary if Bret had just been a professional and just laid down and put Shawn Michaels over like he'd been asked to do. That's just how I feel about it. I think Bret Hart is an incredible performer. I think he's legitimately one of the best in-ring workers ever, but he is also the epitome of a guy who reads his own press, and I think the whole thing could have been avoided if he would have just put Shawn over. Rational Mexican. Steve, what do you think of Bill Murray movies? I just saw Lost in Translation and Broken Flowers, and I just didn't get what was so great about them. I actually found them kind of slow and boring, yet critics seem to like them a lot. I just feel like Bill Murray always plays the same boring character ever since Ghostbusters. Bill Murray definitely has a type, and I suppose it's just a matter of taste as to whether you find that type boring or not, and it differs from film to film. But yeah, Bill Murray usually plays similar characters. He has a type, and lots of actors have types. You know, Humphrey Bogart had a type. Robert Mitchum had a type. Buster Keaton had a type. Lots of great actors, legitimately great actors, have a particular type of character that they tend to play. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad actor. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It just, certain actors have certain strengths that they like to play to, and that's completely legitimate. What I love about Lost in Translation and Broken Flowers, and especially Lost in Translation, which is one of my very favorite films, is that Bill Murray plays that same type, but he shows us different sides of it. He shows us that type with a more emotionally serious side, a more melancholy side. And that's, as far as Bill Murray goes, that's what I love about those films. Again, particularly Lost in Translation. I just think it is such a beautiful, sad film that is also funny, and the humor in it is not like a Ghostbusters type humor where you laugh out loud, although I think there are some laugh out loud moments in Lost in Translation. It's more gentle, it's more derived from observation and human nature and these little insights into relationships and relationships with each other and behavior and things like that. I don't know, I really love Lost in Translation. I think Broken Flowers is good too, but Lost in Translation to me is one of my very, 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 very favorite films. Kevin Casey, Steve, what is your opinion of the government shutdown? Is this an acceptable strategy? Are both sides being petulant children? How long do you think this will last, and how will it play out? It's not an acceptable strategy, or at least it shouldn't be. And no, both sides are not being petulant children. One side is being petulant children, and that side is the Republican side, the conservative side. Seth Meyers had a really good joke about it on Saturday Night Live last weekend, where he said the Republican philosophy is basically, if at first you don't succeed, kick the ball into the woods. And that's exactly what they're doing. There was a vote on the Affordable Care Act 3 years ago. They lost the vote, and they have spent every moment since then trying to attack and undermine this law that they just don't like. And every challenge that has been put up against the Affordable Care Act has been defeated. Obama was reelected president after the law was passed. The law was affirmed as constitutional by the Supreme Court. There's no reason for this law not to be enacted, and yet they are willing to shut down the government and just completely ball up their fists and hold their breath until they turn blue to oppose this law, to protest it, and to stop it from being enacted. And it's pathetic. It's pathetic, and it's embarrassing, and it's disgraceful, because, and the most disgraceful thing is this: now that the government has shut down, the deadline passed, the federal government is shut down. I can't go visit Antietam Battlefield now because it's a national park and the national parks are all closed. Is the way that the Republicans and their conservative mouthpieces on Fox News, etc., all they're talking about how, yeah, the government shut down, no big deal, what's the big deal, the sky didn't fall, you know, nothing is that bad, we don't need, basically saying that the federal government shutting down is actually kind of a good thing, we don't really need all this stuff. Completely ignoring the fact that the Center for Disease Control is essentially non-operational at this point. The Food and Drug Administration is essentially non-operational at this point. And you know, the National Park Service is non-operational. Federally funded, federally operated museums are closed. NASA is essentially non-operational at this point. And these are all things that might not affect you immediately on a daily basis in your life, but that they are incredibly important programs that exist for a reason, that were instituted for a specific purpose, that are unable to serve their purpose until this is all resolved. And it's just shameful. It's absolutely shameful. Not to mention people who depend on government assistance, who depend on government programs, that will begin to suffer, truly suffer hardships if this goes on too long. and the blithe sort of snide dismissal of those people by those who are proud of the Republicans who engineered this government shutdown is absolutely disgraceful. They should be ashamed of themselves. But they're not ashamed of themselves because they don't appear to be capable of shame. At least not any sort of shame related to how people treat each other, or shame related to the shirking of responsibilities of elected officials, or shame that you might feel if you placed the furtherance of your own ideology ahead of the welfare of people in your country. That's the shame that people should feel for those things. Republicans in the United States Congress, apparently they're not capable of feeling that kind of shame. It's just disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. As for how long it will last, I don't know. I hope it doesn't last very long. So, there you go. Hopefully it will be over in a flash. Like a flash of... Hey, it's time for...
The lightning round. Rapid fire questions. Glib and adequate answers.
Patrick Dodds, Steve, of the two post-Silence of the Lambs, Hopkins as Lecter follow-ups, which one is the more preferable, Hannibal or Red Dragon? Hannibal, without a doubt, hands down. Hannibal's not even that great of a movie, but it is miles and miles better than Red Dragon, which is fucking horrible. Gnarly Rants, who do you think is the most overrated DC comic book character? Harley Quinn. I cannot stand that character, and I cannot fathom how anybody could think that that was a great character. Harley Quinn, absolutely. One of my least favorite comic book characters of the last 20, 25 years. Czar Robber Fly, question for the lightning round. What is your favorite multisyllabic word? Cocksucker. Media Gold, speaking of Star Trek fan flicks, have you seen Star Trek Continues, Steve? I think it's the best fan film by far, and the acting is pretty good. I agree, the acting by the cast in Star Trek Continues is much better as far as the acting than Star Trek New Voyages. They've only done one episode so far, but the one episode was pretty good. And in terms of just the performances, I agree. The cast is much better, and they're more suited to their roles than the New Voyages cast. Flippy Master 02. Hey Steve, what do you think of atheist YouTubers Thunderfoot, the Amazing Atheist, and Cult of Dusty? Also, what do you think of the MPAA and movie rating systems in general? And also, what's your favorite curse word? Well, I don't watch Thunderfoot or Amazing Atheist very much. I do watch Cult of Dusty, and I think he's hilarious. I don't agree with him on everything. There are points where we diverge, but in general, just as a personality and as a video producer, I think he's hilarious, and I really like him. What do I think of the MPAA and movie rating systems in general? I don't find them very useful. I would be just fine without them. And what's my favorite curse word? Fuck. It's not a very creative choice, but my favorite curse word is fuck. Isaac Barlow, what was the first record or tape, yes, I'm that old, that you purchased? The first, it was a tape, and the first tape that I purchased with my own money, as opposed to having someone buy it for me as a gift or whatever, it was actually Eric Clapton's Unplugged. In, I think, 1991, I guess. I would have been 11 years old. That was it. Clapton Unplugged, the first tape I actually purchased for myself. David Schumacher, the way you go on at the end of every video about getting questions kind of makes it seem like you sometimes don't get a lot, but is that really the case? No, I always get more than I can use. There is a very cruel process of weeding down the list into a manageable number of questions that I can answer in a video. But the reason I do that at the end of every video is to make sure that the questions keep coming, and in case someone is watching this for the first time and might want to know how to submit a question. So I always do that at the end, because I want to make sure that if you have a question after you watch this, you know where to send the question, and you know that I am encouraging you to ask. Charles Kunkel, hey Steve, I'd really like an answer to this one. Have you ever read Niven's Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex? And if so, what did you think? I have. I think it's genius. I think it's one of the funniest superhero-related things I've ever read. And if Kevin Smith is not sending Larry Niven some checks, he probably should, because he owes him a great debt. The Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex is a great essay. Dr. Themo, hey Steve, do you have a favorite Mel Brooks movie? If so, which one, and what was your favorite part? Yeah, I do. It's The Producers, and my favorite part is, oh, my blanket, my blue blanket. It's my favorite part. Kevin Nyberg, Steve, in several of your videos, you hint that your stature is a bit on the imposing side. Just how tall are you? It's not that imposing. I'm just a tiny, tiny hair under 6'1", so not that imposing. Sorry if I've given you that impression. Hey, that's it for the questions. Before I get out of here, let me do a shout out. The shout out this week, richly, richly deserved, goes to AwesomeRants. And never was there a more aptly named YouTube channel than AwesomeRants, because she is indeed awesome. I've been a fan of hers for quite a while. How I ever managed to get twice as many subscribers as she has, I do not know. I will never understand. But if you haven't checked out AwesomeRants YouTube channel, you absolutely should, because she's just a delight. She's incredibly charming and just intimidatingly intelligent and articulate and quick, and it's just a great channel to watch. She's slowed down her output a little bit lately. She's been busy with school, but she said she's going to try to start a schedule and maybe release like a video a week when she has the time, and I hope that works out. Just from a completely selfish place. I hope that works out, because I really enjoy watching her videos. And if you don't regularly watch her stuff, you should give her a chance. AwesomeRants, because she is awesome. This is the 52nd one of these that I have done, which means I've been doing this series for a year. And I mentioned a moment ago that I have accumulated twice as many subs as AwesomeRants. I'm knocking on the door of 25,000 subscribers as I sit here and record this. When I started this series a year ago, I had just made it to 5,000. So in the last year, I have quintupled my number of subscribers. I have 5 times as many subs now as I did 1 year ago. And I say that not to brag on myself, but to thank you guys for that, because that's because of you. For whatever reason, what I've done, what I do in these videos, all the different videos I do on this channel has resonated with you guys. And it's just, when I think about it, having 5 times as many subs now as I had a year ago, that is really amazing. And I owe a lot to people like Wildwood Claire and Dark Matter, who have given me shout outs and have introduced me to a lot of you guys watching this possibly. But I owe it to you guys too. Every single one of you who subscribes to me, who watches my stuff, who comments on these videos. It is an honor to be able to do this with you and for you. And I really appreciate it. So I will be back. I'm going to keep doing it. And I will be back next week to do this again. Assuming, of course, that you ask me some questions. So if you have a question for me about anything, nothing is too serious, nothing is too silly, leave a comment on this video. Ask me your question, and I will answer as many of them as I possibly can in the next episode. So until then, take it easy, and again, thank you guys so much. I'll see you.